Now, folks, if you're a graduate, I recommend doing two or three of these consecutively. After two or three of them, practice using the tool, you'll get this information. Then you'll be very comfortable if you're publicly traded to look at your companies. If you're not publicly traded, you might look at a customer you're selling into. Or you may want to look at a company that's a competitor in your industry that's publicly traded. It's a great way to assess kind of how what market share we have, how to differentiate ourselves against competitors, but it's also a great way to look at your customers. Some of you maybe just be looking at it as a way to assess companies you may want to invest in. Anyway, you do that, these tools, these resources will absolutely build that capability for you. So it looks like about 50% of us, or so a little bit more than half, this is your first time. So welcome. Excellent for those that are coming back. So about 45% of you are coming back. So we're excited to have you. I hope you continue to come and enjoy. By the way, if you're coming and you're liking this, invite colleagues. They don't have to have gone through a program. It's a great way to help build people's capability around understanding these earnings calls. So I think the tools are up and running. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump and start sharing my screen here. So you should be able to share. You should be able to see my screen now. And I'm going to jump right into our conversation. Let's jump into Electronic Arts Q2 performance. So here's my next question. I've got a quick second poll question for you. When was the last time you actually listened to an earnings call? Let me open up that poll for you. So the last time you listened to a call, let's see. Oh, got to go back and maybe close the other one. So hold on here. Let me stop sharing. Then I should be able to do it. Here we go. Okay, when's the last time you listened to an earnings call? You signed up to join us today. Have you had a chance to listen to one? You know what? I've never had a chance to listen to one is an option there. Or down at the very bottom, I'd rather go to a dentist than to listen to one of these. These earnings calls to me are what I call kind of that hidden gem. They're information that is provided to the market. They're not required to do these calls. They are required every quarter to get their financial information submitted to the Security Exchange Commission, what we call the SEC. They're required to do that. They're also required to get certain information to their investors. Well, most companies will take this opportunity to have this call because they don't want to just send their financial performance, their strategy out to the market without them having the chance to kind of give their philosophy, their strategy. It kind of gives insights around what they're trying to do. So these calls happen every single quarter. What's interesting, a very small percent of even companies that are publicly traded, so like 25% of employees actually listen to these calls. But if I was going to give you one bit of advice as you try and build your business and financial acumen, if you're publicly traded, I would engage around these every single quarter. If you're privately held, but you have customers that are publicly traded, again, every quarter I look at some of your biggest customers that are publicly traded, understand what are they focused on? What are their goals and objectives? Because as a salesperson, if I'm trying to sell my product to a customer, if I know what their strategy is, what goals and objectives, then all I have to do is make the case how a partnership with my company will drive their cash flow, for example, or their profitability, if those are their objectives or goals. So it's a great way to kind of capture this information. They're available to everybody to engage around these calls. So it looks like many of us have had a chance, about 55% again, have had a chance to at least listen, and just a few of you have not. No worries on that. So let me jump into this. As you think of these calls, if only about 25% of employees understand or listen to these calls, here's some other kind of sobering statistics. Only about 95% of employees understand their company's strategy. As you get in these large companies like a EAA, or Electronic Arts Organization, they have about 13,700 employees at the end of last year. How do I get everybody seeing what I'm trying to accomplish? Well, here's another kind of stat that's interesting. Only about 90% of employees don't understand their company's key metrics or measures. So you're the CEO of Electronic Arts. You're Andrew Wilson, been with the company about 20 years. Been the CEO, I think, about the last 10 to 13 years. I can't remember exactly how long he's been in that role. You're a global leader in gaming. We all know it. At least for me, EA Sports is a big one. It's in the game, right? That's a tagline. They also have many other Apex, Sims. These are all gaming or interactive engagements that they provide. Very well known globally. Been in business for about 40 years. Some of their portfolio of kind of IPs, Apex Legends, Battlefield, The Sims, many of the EA Sports, of course, That's the football club. Used to be FIFA, Madden, NFL, NHL. They even have college football. This PGA Tour, I'm going to kind of open up here a little bit. My wife and I played PGA Tour. Here I am, a very seasoned individual, but we love it. We used to play Tiger Woods golf when our kids were little, and we still play a version of that today, one of their games. So a great way to kind of connect. Large workforce, about 13,700 employees. 66% of those employees are located internationally. So you got only about 25% of employees listen to these calls, is a stat that Harvard put out. 95% of employees don't understand core strategies of a company. Again, another Harvard metric. And then 90% of employees don't understand key metrics to measure. That's some data that we have. Well, now you're the CEO of this large corporation. You have global demands. You have investors who want a return on what's going on your performance. So the real question is, what is it you really need your employees to know? What is it you need your customers to know? What about those shareholders as well as potential partners to know? Well, that's what this call is all about. It's a chance for them to communicate externally, internally, to engage around how did we perform? Where do we see ourselves going? And how are we going to get there? So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at Electronic Arts Q2 2025 financial results. Again, their Q3 numbers, they just finished their Q3 performance, but they won't come out till February 4th. So if you're connected, if this is a company you want to look at, you're going to get the most recent Q2 information. In about 2 weeks, you'll get their Q3 information. I can't think of a better time to be engaging around this type of a call. So here's my commitment to you. My goal in the next 40 or so minutes is to inspire you enough to, one, have confidence that you can do this. This is not as complicated as it may feel at times. As you hear all these metrics thrown at you, you hear all these strategic objectives. We're going to simplify it to a simple framework. 5 fundamental drivers: cash, profit, assets, growth, and people, and 2 simple tools: an executive alignment tool, which is our strategy tool, and our navigating the financial tool, which is our financial assessment tool. My commitment, my guarantee to you is if you get inspired enough to do this, if you will do this 2 to 3 quarters consecutively on your company, a company you're interested in, a customer, competitor, my guarantee is you will absolutely build your credibility. You will build your career and you'll build your company. Here at Acumen Learning, we've had the chance to work with 34 of the Fortune 50, many of the Fortune 500. What we find is senior leaders are doing everything they can to squeeze a dollar of the financial statement, try and greater profitability, greater cash flow. But as you think about it, a large corporation, 13,700 employees, who really impacts the business? It's the employees. It's the colleagues, it's the peers, it's direct reports within those organizations. What we find is we work with some of the best companies in the world, the largest, most successful companies in the world, is this: that their employees are functionally brilliant, very good at what they do. I've never met an employee who woke up in the morning and said, I really hope to screw up the company today. It's just not what it is. They're driven to be successful. They're driven to drive results. The challenge sometimes is that we get so focused on our individual area. We're making decisions based upon our individual area. Well, what these calls allow you to do is to step back once a quarter, get a quick connection. What are we trying to do as a company? What's my customers doing? What are my competitors doing? How did we perform? Let's keep score, what I call the financial statements. To me, I call them a scoreboard. Let's keep score. Let's see our strategy. Then with that information, go back to my role and say, what can I do about it? As you do that 2 to 3 quarters consecutive, it absolutely will build your career. It'll build your credibility, it'll build your career, and it'll build your company. So let's jump into it. The process is very simple. A 3-step process. You go and engage around these earnings calls. Number 1, you got to prepare for these calls, and I'll talk about how to prepare. 2 is the analysis. That's the major portion. That will take some time. And then the last part is apply. If you don't get to this one, boy, I really wasted your time, because you take the time to prepare and you engage, and then you don't say, what am I going to do about it? You're missing out on building that credibility. Honestly, we have employees who take our class, who do this, where their managers will come back to them after a quarterly report and they'll say, how come you know so much about our company? How come you know so much about our strategy? That ability to understand what's going on. Folks, it's simple. It's provided every quarter. All you have to do is engage around it with some simple tools, and you'll absolutely understand what's going on with your company as well as your senior leadership. Then go back to your role and help make those decisions. So let's jump in the prepare phase. And in the tool that we'll give you at the end of our program today, it walks you through the prepare. As I described, these calls, they happen on a quarterly basis. They're usually about 45 minutes to an hour and a half. 99% of them are somewhere between 50 minutes to an hour. They're typically broken up into two sections. The first is the prepared remarks. Now, again, this is not required by law. This is where their senior leadership come and they give their performance perspective. It's not regulated, so there's always going to be a little bit of a marketing pitch. They kind of describe kind of how we performed, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. One of the big goals of these calls is to build confidence in what we're doing. They're trying to encourage shareholders that are with us to stay with us and why they should stay with us. Those shareholders are not with us. They're trying to engage them to say, this is why you want to be part of our experience. The second half of the session is all about a Q&A. Now, this is not a Q&A for you and I, for most of the companies. There are very few that allow individual investors to ask questions. It's these large financial institutions, Barclays, Wells Fargo, all these big companies, they have analysts that are tracking the stock. Not only are they tracking the stock, they're tracking the industry. So they get on the call and they get a chance to ask clarifying questions. Now, the purpose of that for them is they're trying to get as clear as they can because they're going to write a report. They're going to make a suggestion to their investors. There's actually 5 levels, but the most common is buy, hold, or sell. So they're trying to make those recommendations to their investors. So that's the Q&A part. So with that in mind, here's what you want to do in the prepare phase. The first thing, you got to go locate the call. You got to find out where you can get that call. So let me kind of walk you through how to do it. It's pretty simple. There's this new website you may have heard of. It's just barely came out. It's called Google. Just kidding. It's been out for quite some time. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to share that screen. I'll just walk you through the process. This works on any company you may want to look at. So if I just come here right into Google, I just type in who I'm looking for. So I'm just going to electronic. It's already doing it because I've used it before. Electronic arts. And what am I looking for? Q2. You could do earnings report, earnings call, transcript, any of these would kind of get you to there. So I'll just click on earnings. So it's going to give me kind of a quick review that's provided, but I'm looking for their report. I come right here, EA, Investor Relations, that's what the IR stands for. Click there, and I'm there. See how easy that was? I typed in earnings call for EA, Electronic Arts, and it took me to their quarterly report. If you don't get there, if it doesn't automatically get there, it's going to take you to their investor page, and you're just going to look for quarterly results, annual report, events or presentation. They're very similar. You can find that. Now, Electronic Arts does a great job. They provide a tremendous amount of information. First is their press release. Press releases are a great resource. This is kind of a summary of what they want to say to the market. So it's a great little, if you want a quick synopsis of what's going on, I can read through that and get a decent amount of information. Not only that, before they actually submit to the Security Exchange Commission their quarterly report, which is called a 10Q, versus an annual report, which is called a 10K, you can actually, in these press releases, get their financial information, where literally they'll have their financial statements in this document. Well, they have their prepared remarks. If you want to see word for word what they said, it's right there. This is what they communicated to the market. What I love is they give the transcript. The transcript is word for word, not only what they said, it gives who was in the call. So not only their leadership, but all the analysts. So you can see, here's the analysts that were on the call and asking the questions. Word for word what they said, but eventually it gets to Q&A. So here's Eric Handler from Roth Capital, LLC. He's asking a question. Their CFO, Stuart Canfield, answered the question. All available to you. Now, because the quarter's already happened, they have all this information. But let's say I want to go and I want to engage around their Q3 call. Well, I can actually go in and actually register for that call in most cases. Right here, if I click on right here, it'll actually let me register for that call. Here, it's telling you when the call is going to happen. So for this call, you could click on this right here, Investor Relation, and allow you to actually register for the call. and you can engage when that call happens. Now, if it hasn't already happened, you're going to go, or you want to get registered for it. Once it's happened, then they're going to give you that information that you found of all the data. So after the call happens, within 24 hours after February 4th, all this is going to be filled out for Q3. The other thing I really like, I'll just highlight real quick, is that if they have a slide deck, it gives a great little synopsis of what they want to highlight as well. So folks, that's the first step of the process. In the prepare phase, you've got to actually go and you've got to find or connect with the call. If it's prior to the call, you register for it. If it's already happened, you can just gather that information. Then the next step of the prepare phase is just to review your notes. And you say, well, Brent, what notes are you talking about? I haven't done one of these. That's okay. You can actually go back to, I just showed you, you could go to Q2 and quickly review what they talked about. But once you do this exercise, you complete our webinar worksheet, you'll be able to quickly pull those notes and assess how they talked to what they communicated in the prior quarter. So review whatever information you want to. Once you've done it a couple times, just bring up your sheets. You'll see what they said. Then you can say, well, how did they actually perform? The last thing I recommend is this idea of doing it with others. If you're publicly traded, it's a great thing. If you're a manager, if you're not a manager, get with colleagues, direct reports, your manager, and walk through this exercise together. It's a great way, especially to get a function together, to say, let's listen to this call as a group. And as a group, let's say, okay, now for the next quarter, what should we focus on? So folks, that's the prepare phase. You got to locate it, review any of the prior quarter information, and then engage in that exercise with some colleagues. Well, the next phase is this analyze phase. And this is where you're going to get the framework and the two tools. So let me start with the framework. Let's get that chat box open if you don't have it open. And let's just kind of do a quick review. For those that haven't been through our program, I want to be able to give a quick overview of this framework. Now, folks, it's not rocket science. It's simply there's 5 fundamental drivers every company focuses on. Whether you're about a 2.6 to 3 billion electronic arts, or you're a small mom and pop little street vendor, there's 5 fundamental drivers. Cash. Oops. Let me go back. Oops, man, my mouse is a little fidgety today. So cash, profit, assets, growth, and people. The foundation of the 5 drivers are the financial statements. When most people think business or financial acumen, they think of understanding financial, and that's absolutely important. But remember, financial statements are giving you, it's a scoreboard. It's giving you a historical perspective. You need to be able to take that information and say, okay, based upon what I'm seeing, what should I do to impact cash? What should I do to impact profit, assets, growth, and people? That eventually, the next quarter, you can improve those numbers. So let's do a quick review of the 5 drivers. Those that have been through our class, let's answer a few questions. Let's start by saying, let's talk about cash. Cash is blank. Fill in the blank for me. Cash is king. Yes, king. Let's get queen in there. Royalty is another term you could say. One of the most common things is cash is like the oxygen of a company. Ron Sharam communicated that. It's vitally important. That being said, how many of you woke up this morning and said, hey, I'm going to go generate more cash today? Even if you're sales, you're thinking, I want to get more sales. I want to drive more revenue. We rarely say, I'm going to go drive cash. That being said, whether you know it or not, the decisions you make day in and day out are driving towards cash. So some key levers to remember, anything you do to drive top line revenue or reduce costs eventually becomes cash. But then you deal with like your contract terms. So days sales outstanding, you may have heard. How quickly we provide a product, we get paid. Walmart, they get paid very quickly versus actually Electronic Arts gets paid very quickly versus a manufacturing plant like a Johnson & Johnson, they're providing products to Walmart. They may not get paid for 90 days, right? So determining how quickly you can collect your cash. Inventory is a place where you impact cash. And then, of course, payables as well. So cash is king, vitally important, one of the drivers to look at. The next driver I want to talk about is profitability. There's 2 fundamental levers that I call it Business 101. So if you've been in my class, you'll get this, Business 101. There are 2 of the drivers that I just talked about around cash, but these 2 levers impact everything else. So here's what it is. You got to increase one lever or decrease other. If I want to grow my profitability, what do I need to increase or decrease? So that is right there on top of that. Increase my sales or revenue, same term, also known as our top line, by the way. Sales, revenue, top line are all the same thing, as well as reducing my cost. Now, I know that's a new concept. You've never heard anything about reducing cost, right? That's probably one of the biggest levers we hear in corporations. If you've been through our class, you would have heard it, had us walk you through the impact of a reduction of $1 to the bottom line versus the increase of revenue by $1. That's quite substantial. So we get a lot of pressure on that. So profitability is all about driving that top line sales. Now you can grow your sales or revenue through increasing your price of what you charge for your products or services, as well as selling more, what you call volume. Those are the two levers to impact that top number. And then our reduced costs, if you look at that whole company, it's any expenses. So, folks, these two drivers, the first two are big drivers that they talk about in earnings calls. What's happened to our cash? What's going on from our profitability perspective? Now, assets are anything you own or control which has value. When we talk about assets, you talk about asset strength, like how much cash you have, how strong your balance sheet is, versus taking that, leveraging your assets and utilizing them, investing in new technologies, new products, and with that balance between how financially strong I am versus how much of that investment do I take and reinvest in my company, new technologies, new innovation. And what's that right balance to make sure we're able to withstand the ups and downs? So assets is all about asset strength, kind of what you have, financial position versus asset utilization, how you use those assets to drive cash and profitability. Of course, growth is what investors expect, and people are what makes it happen. Now, when we talk people, you're talking both external customers, those that buy or use your products or services, but also internal, how your team comes together and gets great execution. So, folks, that's the 5-driver model. And the foundation of cash is the cash flow statement. You want to know what's going on with cash at EA Sports? You're going to look at their statement of cash flow. You want to know how they're doing from a profitability perspective? You're going to look at that income statement. If you want to know how financially strong they are, you're going to look at their balance sheet. So, folks, we use that framework in both of the two tools that I'm going to share with you right now. So the first tool is called the executive alignment tool. With this tool and any executive communication, whether it's an earnings call or maybe internally at your company, you have a town hall meeting, whether it's an email you got from your senior leadership, just using this simple mental model, the 5 drivers to assess the strategic focus. Here's how it works. When you're listening to these calls or engaging in any sort of executive communication, all you do is get a piece of paper out, write cash, profit, asset, growth, and people. Or you open up this webinar tool and you have it right here in front of you. Then what you're going to do is you listen to the call. You're listening. Are they talk about cash? Are they talk about profit? They're talking assets, growth, or people. You start putting slash marks. That's what you do. Now, some of you might say, well, Brent, I get that, but I haven't had much exposure. I know what cash is. I know what profit is, but there's probably some metrics or terms they use that I don't understand. Well, don't worry. Under each one of those, I give you a brief definition of what cash driver is. Not only that, I then give you some example terms to look for. So if I hear them talk about dividends or distributions, I hear them talk about stock buyback, that's going to be cash definitely for me. Not only that, you'll find that some of these terms can be used across multiple drivers. For example, they talked about we paid out in dividends $100 million. Well, dividends is going to be cash because that's actually cash dollars I'm giving back to investors, but it's also benefiting my investors. So I might put a slash down here for people and I put a slash up here for cash. That's how it works. It's not rocket science. By the way, if you do this with colleagues, you will not all get the same number of slash marks. But every year we do over 1,000 sessions with different companies, different industries all over the globe. And what you'll find is the top 2 or 3 drivers for everybody in the group will rise to the top as key focus areas. Once you get clear on where they're focusing, you answer 4 simple questions. Which business drivers seem to get the most attention and why? I love that second part. What are the 2 or 3 main points the executive was trying to make? What are their goals, objectives going forward? And then finally, because we're listening to an earnings call, what key questions or concerns were raised by the analyst community? What were they focused on? That's the tool. Now imagine you do this for the next 2 or 3 quarters, how quickly you'll be able to see, hey, I can see what our leadership's talking about. Then go through that process. And the final question is, so what should I do about it? So let me walk you through this tool. We don't have time to go through the whole call line by line, but I've got 3 quotes I'm going to give you. So open up your chat box, and using these 5 drivers, I want you to help me. Let's start determining which of the 5 drivers was Mr. Wilson and team focused on. So here's the first quote from the CEO, Andrew Wilson. He said this: EA's strong fiscal year continues as we again delivered in the quarter and raised our full year guidance. As you look at the 5 drivers on the right-hand side, which of the 5 drivers in just that first sentence would you say he's focused on? Just on that first sentence. Okay. You got growth in there. Right here, full year guidance. That guidance, well, what is that guidance? Could be profit, right? But definitely growth is going to be. Here's the next one. Our success this quarter driven by the depth and quality of our portfolio. What would portfolio be? He's talking about all the different technologies and products he has. Portfolio, he had assets, there you go. And content delivered by our amazing teams. What driver there? Highlights the increasing momentum across our business and progress against our strategic vision. There's multiple ones in here. Yes, you got assets. He talks portfolio as well as content. He's talking about momentum, could be growth. And then, yes, our team. He's talking about the value of the team's impact as well. Right here, our amazing team. Okay. As you saw at Investor Day, you should expect us to continue adding new connections. What driver? More modalities. What driver? More creative tools and new community spaces beyond the field of play to continue the momentum well into the future. What drivers are you hearing there? Yeah, you got assets, you got growth for sure. Yeah, people. These are all products for their customers. Excellent. So what are we hearing? We're hearing a lot about growth. We're seeing some assets and some people is what we're hearing. There's some profitability as well, but those seem to stand out. Well, let's look at their CFO. So now you're going from the CEO, kind of this big picture. Now let's go CFO, more kind of financially driven. Let's see what he said. I won't read through it. You just kind of scan through it. Which drivers are you seeing? I'll just underline some trigger words for me. So I'm underlining some of this momentum, net bookings. That's the kind of their top line revenue number. Their team, they're talking about team again. High quality, their global community, their franchise. Now, as we look to the future, we remain focused on executing our strategic roadmap, delivering long-term value creation, drive top-line growth. That one's pretty easy when you have that right there. Not only, but this one can be multiple ones. You're going to see growth right there because that's one of them. But top line is a revenue number. So you could also see profit as well. Improve margins. Which one is that? Well, that's a profit driver. Cash flow right there. You got cash. Now, if you didn't have the exact same ones I have, it's okay. Like I said, as we do about 1,200 sessions a year, invariably the top 2 or 3 rise to the top. And you're seeing that in the chat box. We're seeing a lot around growth. We're seeing a lot around people. You're seeing a lot around assets. A little bit about profit and a little bit about cash as well. But definitely growth's going to be towards the top. Probably assets and people might be where you see that. Well, folks, that's how you do it. Now, again, we could continue to go another 20 minutes. We could get through even more of this, but we don't have time to do that. So what I did is I went through and kind of completed it. So kind of you'll see some of the ones that kind of stood out. You got definitely your assets and growth. I wasn't as high on people as those 2 quotes were. I had a little bit more on profit in what I saw. In the end, it's not, if yours doesn't look like that, it doesn't matter. But typically, you're going to see the top 2 or 3 will rise to the top. So then you go into the next stage and you fill it out. So what I've done is I've walked through it from my perspective as a consultant looking at their company. I went through and kind of filled out these questions. So I want to walk you through the answers to this. Now, if you happen to have done this on your own, Please add any color as I jump through each one of these questions. So the first question, which business drivers seem to get the most attention and why? Well, for me, it was growth. Well, why? Well, this slide from their presentation really speaks to it right here. So American football up over 140% year over year in Q2. Record bookings at 2.1 billion in bookings. Live services net bookings grew by 10%. So the top three are growth, growth, and growth. Now it can be growth around profitability, it can be growth around customers, etc. Again, significant amount of their revenue coming from their live services. This is like subscriptions, continued purchase as people kind of customize their experience, etc. So significant amount of growth emphasis in the group. Some specific things, their net bookings in that quarter were about 2.1 billion, 14% growth year over year. Full game bookings of 20%. Excellent. Does bookings, the question, does bookings refer to sales or products or purchases of stocks? So bookings for them is they're selling their products or service. Great question. Now, why they call it bookings is because they take the dollar amount, but if it's like it's a subscription, it's 6 months subscription, generally accepted accounting principles, they won't be able to count that as revenue, but they're trying to get an accurate, how much did we sell in a quarter? And then if they have to spread it over multiple quarters of usage, their gap number will be a little different. So they're really saying in that quarter, they sold about 2.1 billion of products and services. Let me know if that answers your question, Thra. So 20% on the full game net bookings, 20%. Live services net bookings is up 10%. Strong engagement with their team, more than doubling its player base year over year. That's the NFL and college football. Saw a huge growth in how many engaged around that. EA raised their guidance. So they're doing so well from a growth perspective that they increased their guidance. So rather than a 7.4 billion be the low end, they jumped up to 7.5 billion is kind of their low end of their bookings. The last thing I'd highlight around growth, expanding its player base, increasing engagement. So one of their big focused areas is to expand their player base, increasing engagement, and introducing new product innovations. One of the big factors, they have over, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the 600 to 700 million players. That's huge, folks. So how do I keep them engaged, continue to provide new products? And it's really kind of bridging rather than the old days. I was playing Atari or Apple II, that really dates me a little bit. But if you're playing some of these games, it was just you playing against the computer or against your friend or your family member. Well, now, because of the internet, you're able to weave in. They'll actually have commentary from a recent game integrated into some of their applications, making that kind of live versus virtual world somewhat seamless. And they're seeing new ways to do that. And that's a big goal, to continue to expand their growth, expand its player base, increasing engagement, and introduce new products and innovation. In fact, some of those highlights on new products and innovations. So FC is the FIFA, it's their football club group, Sims, Apex. Here's some of the groups. I don't know all these. Formula One, I recognize that one. Q2, college football 2025. That's where you saw that. That's what they're anticipating. July 19th coming out with the 2025 NFL will launch on the August 16th of last year. And so their football club also. So here's some other ones. Their NHL and Veilguard is a kind of a battle application, if I remember correctly. Dragon Age was huge. Yeah, Suzanne, it was. And this is so they were talking about this. It was 10 years ago when they came out that Dragon Age first one. And so now this is the latest and greatest. So interested to see what the next stage will be. Anyways, it has come out. So you may know better than I. Jordan's saying it's a huge flop. So maybe it didn't go as well. Again, this is Q2 information. I don't have the Q3 information. So folks, that was the first point. So what do I know thus far? Big emphasis on growth, great performance, but they want to continue to sustain that performance. So what are their 2 or 3 main points they were trying to make? Well, one, strong performance, strong enough that we're going to raise our guidance. That was a huge message they wanted to communicate. Continue growth through engagement and innovation. Think about this. they're only good as the next game that they have in mind. It reminds me a little bit of the pharmaceutical industry. If you're very patent driven, you always got to be ahead of the game to find another patent, because once that patent comes off, your profitability drops dramatically. So you always have big R&D focused for the future. That's very much what EA is doing. Very focused on the great products they have, the communities they have. How can we continue to enhance and then provide new innovations that really drive engagement? So big focus on growth through engagement and innovation, building connection ecosystems to sustain our engagement across the franchise. Remember, 600 to 700 million gamers. Leverage new technology like generative AI. That was kind of interesting. They didn't spend a lot of time, but if you look at their Investor Day, they talked about AI and how that's going to interact. Anybody familiar with it's a Ready Player One? If you're familiar with that, it sounds a little bit like that, and AI generated content, customer generated content. It's just interesting to see where the world's going to go there. This last statement was a key factor from a growth. EA's play, create, watch, and connect strategy. Of course, play, but they can also go in and create their own content, create their own teams. They can watch it through connections, through live games versus what's going on through their virtual space and how they can make connections. So that's a big tagline. They think of their future as play, create, watch, connect. Is their core strategy. The long-term value creation obviously drives sustainable long-term growth, improve margins, increase cash flow was a key message that they talked about. So growth through continuing to maintain great relations and provide new products for their organization. So where they see themselves going? Well, for Q2, they're given a forecast somewhere between a 1.875 to about 2 billion is what they're looking for their net revenue for Q3. We'll find that out here in just a little bit to see how it's going to look in the quarter. We'll find that out here in just a quarter. Let's see. I had a comment here. Seems to be a lot of pushback from gamers against always online games, live services. That's interesting, Sam. I'm not as connected. Maybe others can weigh in on that. It was interesting to find, like on their football, 70+% of their revenues coming from that live kind of online game experience. Now, if you talk about the free, they call it a free platform, the Apex, it's free to kind of start, but then all the add-ons you pay for or whatever, maybe that's what you're referring to. But they didn't highlight that very much. That's good insight, Sam. If anybody else wants to weigh in on that, go ahead and jump in there. What are the goals, trends, and objectives? So if I was to summarize some of those main goals, sustain momentum in the sports franchise. They're very well known as kind of top level around the sports franchise as a group. Now, maybe not in all spaces, but definitely NFL football, college football, very high, very popular. So continue to maintain that. Expand digital engagement and platforms. How to kind of build that play, create, watch, and connect experience. Innovate across franchises, and then finally drive financial growth and performance, making sure that they don't kind of lose the momentum because they're not as cutting edge with the technologies that they're looking at. So sustain momentum, really focused on kind of American and global fans. How do they keep them engaged, connecting the real world experience to what they're seeing online. Digital enhancements, looking at how AI can integrate and add more value to that. Oh, there you go. That's good to know. Brooklyn's weighing in here on the microtransactions you have to do. Maybe pay for it up front. That's Brooklyn's market here. So what are key questions to answer? So with that in mind, what do we know? Very focused around growth. Had a great growth quarter, up 14% overall, 20% on the full game, 10% on the live game. But really continue to focus on growth and sustainability. So it's the questions around, particularly around American football, the impact of 2025, how they see that going in 2026. Live service performance, questions centered around electronic arts, live services, particularly on sports and non-sports game like Apex Legends. One of the big questions that they talked about is Apex Legends has been around a long time, and they're really talking about trying to innovate. And the question that was asked was, so do you kind of restart or do you just kind of make enhancements? And Andrew really highlighted, he says, companies where they try and restart from scratch, the players really get frustrated if they lose all their kind of where they're at in the experience, all their investment they made into that. So he really highlighted, rather than starting from scratch, really looking at enhancements within the games that are well known, the Apex, the Battlefields. But that doesn't take away from potentially going after new markets. And so looking at new, one of their big statements is storytelling. The story, the experience as you go through the game, the story that's along with it. So coming up with new types of games is an option. But for their big online Apex, Battlefield, they're looking at ways to enhance them. So strategic repositioning of the franchise. What was kind of communicated around that for me? Kind of how do we reinvigorate? Apex has been around for a number of years. Every year they're updating many of the sports ones. But what is that new cutting edge? What is the next, the Dragon Age? So they have this Veilguard as kind of the next stage of that. But what is that new opportunity or new franchise they can create? That was the question analysts were asking. And then finally, some of the upcoming titles, when they're going to come out and that type of stuff. Specifically, Veilguard was one that they talked quite a bit about. So, folks, that was kind of the analyst focus. So what do we know at this point? Well, I understand they had a great quarter. I understand they continue to perform well. There's a hint of feeling that they've got top-notch games in the sport, but what is the next stage for them? What is that next great technology? Sim's been around for 25 years, they said. 25 years that's been around. So it still continues to be a big play. But what is the next one? What is that next stage of innovation and revolution? AI becoming part of that was one of the things they talked a little bit about, much more in their investor day. But that's kind of where they're at. Well, let's see if we can see in the numbers, was it really a good quarter? And how should we think about the quarter through the numbers? And then we'll wrap up with, so what do we do about it? So the second tool is a financial tool. Now, folks, when people look at financials, sometimes they get a little nervous. Think of them as just a scoreboard, just basic information. Now, I'm going to walk them through. If you don't recognize all these terms, it's okay. You can come to our website. We got a glossary. You can access some of that, or just jump online and type in what the term is. But I'm going to walk through how to use this very basic tool to assess any company. Now, what I like about this tool, it brings the 5 drivers, as well as some of the most common metrics every company would focus on. If I was going to give you just top 10 metrics without looking at any unique metrics for a company, these are some of the most common metrics companies would look at. Well, the way the tool works is it gives you the key metrics, then it has the financial statements. And now, don't worry, if you haven't been through the financials, it's okay. It's going to tell you, if I want to find a number, where am I going to go to find it? If I want to find my cash and cash equivalent, I'm going to find it on my balance sheet. So you don't even have to have gone through a program to know where to go find it. Now, if there's some sort of calculation that needs to happen to get to that metric, it shows you how to calculate it. So that's what it is. Not only that, it gives you, when you look at financial statements, you always want to compare one period to another. What I'm going to start with is Q2 2025 versus Q2 2024. You could also do it quarter to quarter, what they call sequential. But you always want to look at those numbers and compare it against a different period. And so that's why you have the comparison on the tool. So let's go ahead and jump in and use this. We want to look for, let's do a few together. I want to get my cash and cash equivalent. So in order to get that, I've got to go to what statement based upon my tool. Open your chat box. Let's just make sure we're all comfortable using the tool. So if I want to get their cash and cash equivalent, what statement do I need to go to? There you go. So I go to that balance sheet. You don't have it, but I do. There it is. There's the balance sheet. If you went in our program, you'll remember if it's a GAAP financial statement, on the balance sheet, they're listed by most liquid down to least liquid. Now, what is liquid? Liquid means how quickly it converts to cash. So, of course, the most liquid is going to be at the very top, and that is cash and cash equivalent. So put in the chat box just to make sure we're comfortable. How much cash did they have on hand as of September 30th, 2024? Go and put that in the chat box. What do you see? Excellent. Thank you. 2197. That's 2,197,000,000. Now, just so you know, if you listen to them, they'll add these two together. They're short-term investments. All it is, if they have enough cash on hand, they don't need it in the next 90 days, they'll put it in a short-term investment. That's what that is. But the number is, the accurate number is right there, 2197. That's how much cash they had on hand as of September 30th. Okay. Well, let's get to the next one. I want to get my cash from operations. You're looking for that metric on what statement? If I want to find the cash from operation, what statement do I need to go to based upon my tool? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you. We're going to go to that statement. Here it is, cash flow statement. The term I'm looking for is right here, net cash provided by operating activities. And because I'm doing the quarterly number, we want to be looking at this one. So how much cash did they generate from the core business? Now, if you're not as familiar with this metric, as people are putting that answer in, how much cash did they generate from their business in Q2 of 2024? Put that in there. That number is the difference between the actual cash dollars that came into their company from providing their products or services, minus the cash that went out to run their company. So that's a net dollar amount. Yeah, $234 million. Now, what do investors want that to do? They want that to go up every month, every quarter, every year. And you can look year over year, significant improvement on that number. So a good metric for them. So 234. Well, let's go to the next one. We went to the balance sheet up here. We went to the cash flow sheet here. So now we're going to go do our profit. Everything I want to find about profit is going to be found on what statement? Sorry, maybe a little small on your screen, especially on your laptop. Yes, it's the income statement. This is probably the statement that most companies talk about, look at regularly with their employees. So here you go. We're back to the Q2 numbers is what I want to get. So we're going to start. I got to get revenue number. So right here's my revenue number. We'll jump in and show you that. So that's the 2025. I'll go back to that statement. Now I want to get my net income. So if this is my revenue, what's my net income? I want my top line. By the way, this is the top line. My bottom line is right here, also known as my net income. How much net income did we have? Excellent. Sorry about that. That's the bottom line, 294. So now we're ready to do the calculation. I plug in the 294, divide by the 2025. This is the last one, then I'll give you the rest of the numbers. We'll jump into the apply phase. So grab your calculator out. Take your $1,000 calculator. Grab your cell phone, right? Go take 294 divided by $2,025. What does it give you? Of course, that's 294 million divided by 2,025 million. Multiply it by 100 to get the percentage. There you go. Looks like we got 14.5. Survey says, yeah, excellent. Thank you, Annabelle and Alexis. Thank you for that. So here's the number. So folks, you can see how to do it. If we had more time, if we were in a class, I'd turn you loose, give you another 8 minutes. You'd have this done. It'll take you about 15 minutes to do this. And once you get really comfortable, you can put it into a spreadsheet if you want. I do recommend, by the way, the first few times, just do it on paper. Here's why. If you do it 2 or 3 times consecutively, you'll always remember what these metrics are because you understand the calculation. Once you get and you understand what net income is always going to be, what an equity ratio is, what return on asset is. As long as you know what that is, then you can go look at the financial information and they typically will provide it for you, or you can do your calculation through Excel or whatever platform you want to use. So there's our numbers. Well, again, I want to compare that. So I'm going to go look at that compared to Q2 of 2024. What do I notice? We have more cash on hand. Definitely. This is a huge benefit. That's a huge benefit to them. Growth numbers are up. We saw that earlier. Now this is down. Interesting enough, if you look at what's going on, they got a tax benefit, a tax credit last year. They didn't get it this year. Now, you wouldn't know that just by looking at the numbers, but if you look into their 10Q, it explains what happened. It's about a $100 million swing of performance. So you're relatively flat on net income number year over year, but the actual number, you're down. Here's our margin. You'll see that margin compression. Again, margin last year benefited because of that tax benefit, $100 million tax benefit, got that margin up pretty high. So if we look at equity ratio, pretty much balanced. This drops again because net income's dropped. You do have top line growth, but because those that tax benefit they got the prior year, you're actually seeing a big windfall last year. When you got the credit, the next year you don't have it, you see a dip. To me, from an accounting perspective, that's just, you would adjust those out and get a comparable number. Well, folks, you can also do it a year to date. So here's their first half numbers, 2025 versus first half 2024. You could then go and look at it as from a competitor perspective. Take Two as the 2K. If you're familiar with the 2K sports games in that group, that's that company. And you can see much smaller well, not much smaller, but 3.6 billion, 3.7 billion versus 2.7. So about $1 billion smaller, not profitable. They're really struggling. Not only that, negative cash flow. So you look at EA Sports compared to one of their competitors in the sporting industry, they're blowing them out of the water. Very strong performance. So that's the keeping score. Well, folks, that's the tool. Well, let me wrap up with the applying phase. The applying phase is absolutely important. If you go through this whole analysis, you don't do anything with it, we've wasted your time. Here at Acumen Learning, we work with 34 of the Fortune 50. And one of the key emphasis of what we try and do with our engagements is to build learning beyond the course. And we had a customer of ours do an analysis, and they said, what's the return they got on their investment? What was the benefits they got? And what you'll find, if you'll do this 2 to 3 quarters consecutive, these will be similar benefits you'll get from listening to these calls and engaging around that, or engaging with us if you want a deeper dive on business acumen. 84% improvement on performance of your business and function. 81% increased collaboration. 87% improved upward communication. By listening to these calls, you can have the conversation with your managers, your executives, etc. Make a business case. 77% improvement on employee engagement, 75% increase on business focus, and 84% improvement in teamwork. Folks, by engaging around these earnings calls, you'll get these type of benefits. If we can help you build your business and financial acumen, these are the results you can get from a program with us. So as we wrap up, to know not to do is not to know. Here's what I put in here from my perspective. Again, some highlights for me. Strong growth, definitely a market leader, especially in that sports game. It was very interesting just to start to look at how AI might impact the gaming experience. The importance of their massive 600 million to 700 million players and how they have to continue to build that community, continue to provide new products and innovation, and how they can collaborate across all the different gaming communities, how to kind of sell across the communities as an opportunity for them. So what would I do with it? Well, as a consultant for me, I want to look at how they're compared against peers. Go back to 2K and look at what they're doing. See what their future might look at. It's just interesting to get that perspective. See how they're playing within the larger market. I would then share that with my consultant teams, my clients and customers. What's going on in this industry? And then for me, man, I would love to work with, if you are an electronics art programmer, employee, etc., and somehow you got connected to this, we would love to work with you. We'd love to get you that 300% return. We'd love to be able to increase the engagement of your employees. That's what business acumen can allow you to do. So folks, the last step of the apply is to go have a conversation. So if it's your own company, go sit down with your manager and say, hey, based upon what I heard, here's the things I think we should do within our function. Folks, that's when your manager is going to say to you, how come you know so much about our business? Because you're able to see what the company's talking about and then apply it within your functional role. If it's a customer or partner, talk to your account team. How can we differentiate ourselves and provide a better product for customers? And then also if it's a competitor you're looking at, how can we differentiate ourselves against competitors? Well, folks, that's the tool. Prepare, analyze, and apply. So remember, in the prepare phase, the second step was to review your notes. Once you've done this, that becomes your notes. That's the information you have. So imagine you've just done this in Q2, take what I provided. Now you jump into Q3 here on February 4th. You can quickly review. What did they say? Let's see if they really did grow and expand as they talked about. How did the rollouts of some of their new products really perform? Was it like our colleague said earlier, it was a flop? Or did their numbers suggest actually maybe it was a flop for some, but it really drove business in certain geographies or certain communities? Well, folks, last step here is to make a commitment. My challenge to you is to take the tool and analyze a customer. So in the chat box, tell me, who are you going to analyze? Is it going to be a company you work for, a company you sell to, a company you compete against, a company you partner with? Maybe it's a company you want to invest in, or you're just interested in. Or if you come back with this next month, we're going to look at Intel. Boy, if you've heard some of the media, what's going on with chips. So NVIDIA, Intel, all those, and what's going on in China, I'll give you a little hint there, how this industry catapulted to strong performance And now competition in China, what's that's doing to this industry? Would be a great one to practice using this tool. Come back with us and join us. We'll be back here on February 26th. Come join us and let's walk through Intel together. Folks, if you go to this link that Brooklyn's put in here, it's going to give you access to a few things. Number one, the tool. Take that tool, download it. Don't just come back next time and just listen again. Join with us. Have a conversation with us. Then, if you want a deeper dive, we have $100 off our self-paced online learning. If it's just something for yourself. If you think this would be helpful for your team, which I guarantee it will be, please reach out to us. We'd love to work with you and help build your business and financial acumen. Help your team build your credibility, build your career, and build your company. Folks, it's been my pleasure to spend some time with you. I'll stay on if there's any additional questions. If not, our time is up. Thank you for our time. We'll see you on February 26th. Thank you much. Have a great day.